Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we keep you updated with all that is happening currently in the country. And on a sad note, we know that on Thursday, about 16 soldiers of the Nigerian government were being killed in Delta State. And we would love to look into that story as well as other stories that are actually, currently trending on our papers this morning. I am Sarah Elisha Dasham, and I'll be doing the program alongside Rachel Tansey.
Good morning, Sarah.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great. How was weekend?
My weekend was okay. How was yours?
It was great. Thanks so much. All right, and to our viewers, do remember you can be part of the conversation by joining us live via Facebook and YouTube, and then you can also drop your comment, your views, your opinions on any of the story we will be looking at this morning. And we should start with the Nigerian News Direct newspaper.
The big story on the paper: Delta soldier killings. Residents desert community in fear of reprisal attacks as Tinubu Senate demand justice, probe into death of slain soldiers. Falana urges army to halt reprisal attacks. More details can be found on page 29. At the top of the paper, unpaid salary anxiety grows as SANU NASU members begin 7-day nationwide strike today. Lagos pushes for special status and listing of LCDAs. Federal government saves 33.1 billion naira from demurrages freight rates. You can find details on page 2. Cement price hike, CPPE faults reps comment on manufacturers. NIPCO triumphs in suit invalidating AEPB's refused disposal levy on corporate organizations. You can find details on page 2. Still on the paper, Kaduna abductions, bandits taking advantage of government weakness to torment us. And this is coming from the former CAN chairman. More details can be found on page 8, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
On the Punch newspaper, federal government eyes $1 billion World Bank loans for IDPs in Agric. More detail found on page 21. And on strike, SANU NASU vow to ground the varsity government forge ignorance. You can find more of that inside the paper. And we also have federal government plans talk with Ghana and others to protect undersea cables, and we're seeing that this might actually linger till April before we'll have these cables being fixed. So if there is a need for you to seek alternative for those who are using some of the current we're talking about network services, you can do how to look for alternative before all of these will be fixed. And we see soldiers killing, which is a big story on the paper. Tinubu Senate and others manhunt for killers. Troops comb the warring communities. With the writer, President condemns the attack, asks the defense headquarters has full authority to bring anybody responsible to justice. Senate, retired generals and other folk demand tough action against killers, condole with the military over the demise. Here we have consumers lament POS machine shortage at Lagos discounted food market. More detail of that can be found in the paper. Senate warns against supplementary budget excess loan. More detail inside the paper. Abducted editor's wife cries for help, says husband easygoing. That's on Human Angle. You can find that story on page 8. Textile import, 7 others go up 1.4 trillion naira after CBN ban lift. More detail on page 22. That's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Matrix, hope rises as OPEC reveals that Nigeria's functional oil drilling rigs rise to 16. You can start with the details on the front page. FA Cup semi-final draw confirmed. You can find the full pictures inside the paper. Alleged 3.7 billion naira budget padding, Sarah blows hot. Tells Apabio to refer case to ICPC, EFCC, reinstate Ningi immediately. The big story, Okwama killings, Tinubu talks tough. The writer saying cowardly offenders responsible for this heinous crime will not go unpunished. Senate seeks persecution of murderers of soldiers in Delta State. Tension as residents flee Delta community over fear of reprisal attack from soldiers. Community raised as Nigerian Army recovers bodies of 14 soldiers. You can find details on page 2. Patronize local products to strengthen Naira, priest tells Nigerians. Of course, I received 1 billion naira for constituency projects, Netwoku buttresses in Dume's claims. How I have plucked leakages in Anambra State finances coming from Soludo. You can find details on page 9. And you can find a story on page 15 that says Spring Stitches launches the Feminine Essence collection. Again, bandits kidnap 14 in fresh Kaduna attack. Federal government plans global cooperation to safeguard undersea cables. You can find details inside the paper. We can see a picture story with the finance minister Edo, and then the minister and the president of Benin Republic. And this is deepening ties between Nigeria and Benin Republic. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
On the leadership newspaper, NJC alert on plan to defraud retired judicial officers. More detail on page 18. Revs Kako's once Labour Party convention shifted. And on fact check, why did the Senate suspend Senator Abdul Ninge? That's a question. And on trending, 16 soldiers killed in Delta communal clash. More detail found on page 2. Despite harsh operation costs, cement makers post huge profits. More detail on page 7. Scarcity of passport looms over 16 billion naira production debt. And the big story as well is the killing of the soldiers. Military lays siege to Bayelsa and Delta Creek. Launches manhunt for killers. Deploy gunboats. Several houses raised as monarch flee to Asaba. Killing of soldiers won't be tolerated. Tinubu wants. You can find more detail of that story in the paper. And I think it's important we talk a little about that, even though this happened since on Thursday. But then it's really a very disheartening one, Rachel, that we'll lose our soldiers in such a manner. I mean, these were soldiers that were deployed there to actually kind of being on a peacekeeping, and then to bring peace between the two communities that were having some clash. And we're seeing that eventually these soldiers have to pay for this. And then questions will be, why were the soldiers killed? I think these are questions Nigerians need. Why would the resident of that state in particular take law into their hands by doing that to the soldier? What exactly did the soldiers do to them? These are questions the Nigerian will ask, because no matter what the case was, our soldiers were not supposed to be involved in all of this thing. But they were saying that they were taken unaware, and that is why this is happening again. This is another look at another flip of insecurity happening. The same soldiers that were asking and pleading to please be on alert to protect us, and the same soldiers that are saying that we're being laid siege and then they died. So it's really a sad one, and I just hope that the government will do something for the dependents of these soldiers, because they definitely have family members, and I just hope that the government will do something. And as well, the manhunt for those who are actually behind it, they really need to be brought to book, because we're tired of this. This is not the first time we're seeing our soldiers are being killed in that manner, but I'm just hoping that whatever investigation that will be done this time around should be different from the way it has been done previously, because those behind this need to be brought to book. We're still looking at, I mean, over 200 in Kaduna. They are yet to be brought back. 14 again were being kidnapped again in Kaduna. And you just can't help to wonder what really is the problem. So I hope that something will be done so that we can have a breath of peace in this country eventually, where everybody will be safe. Because these soldiers do not have two lives, in as much as they are military, but yeah, they still have blood flowing through their body. So something needs to be done to protect them as well in cases like this eventually, so that we don't have a repetition of what has happened in Delta State happening again.
This is one of the cases where we've been talking about it, and that's the angle I want to come from, is the fact that what are soldiers doing there in the first place? This is not war. We've talked about this countless times earlier, that there's misplacement of security jurisdiction in this country. Who is supposed to tackle certain issue and who is not? And then no matter how serious an issue is, for example, if it is between civilians, soldiers are not supposed to be there. If it is, it's supposed to be like that. We have police, and they're supposed to have different arms that will be able to go in and stop communal clashes and all of that, not soldiers. But either way, whether it's been soldiers that are being sent or police, it means if it was the police, we'll have over 16 police officers dead. And if the soldiers as we have it, we're now having soldiers being dead. Now the question is, and the concern for us all the time is that, why do we have our trained professionals when it comes to security being easy target and always laid to waste in such a way you can't help but comprehend? How are we getting it wrong that we always have security men, well-trained personnel being killed by community people, by common? I'm not saying that they are bulletproof to guns and all of that. No, it's a weapon being used. But how is it that there's always this type of killing, and then it looked like it was just common men going against common men, and then common men were being killed, and then we move? We're talking about soldiers here. We're talking about people that should have all the skills, all the resources, all the information to move into that community and restore peace, not to end up being the victims of whatsoever is the problem happening there. And these are the many questions that I don't think we can have the answer for. We can't, because we keep seeing it happening. We can't. If our soldiers were against terrorists, we can say a different issue. But be it gang, be it cult group, be it this, you are supposed to be more organized in your tactics and everything. You're not supposed to be carried on aware in whatsoever. These are things that we might sit down and just give excuse over to just make the situation look a little bit less than what it should be. But either way, we keep seeing our security men go down like common untrained people, and this is the major concern for me. Not even the fact that we are not supposed to have soldiers there, supposed to be the police taking care of community issues and all of that, and the fact that why do we go down like that when you see the soldiers? Just when you want to have a little bit of hope that, you know what, we are in safe hands, then something like this happens, and then you wonder, if civilians are killing soldiers, who is going to protect us in Nigeria? And this, for me, is the major concern. Regardless of how this happened or how it took place, this is a major concern for me.
You know, Richard, just like you rightly stated, I mean, there was a time in this country where soldiers were not seen mingling among civilians. I mean, their jurisdiction is to be by the borders, you know, peacekeeping in other countries and all of that. And then we've asked this question here, why we say that, and when our soldiers go peacekeeping outside the country, they do excellent, they do fabulous. In fact, our soldiers are known to be one of those best security outfit outside the country. But then each time we're back home, we just can't help but ask certain questions, which you've asked some. And just like we said, we're waiting for answers, and we hope that regardless, right, just like you said, regardless of whether it was the police or the army, those who are behind this need to be brought to book. I said as an example that you don't take any life regardless, and then you get away with it. So we look forward to seeing how this whole thing will turn out to be. Still on the leadership newspaper, Barrow Port project far from completion, Niger communities lament. You can find more detail of that on page 16. Putin wins another term as Russian president. For those who are interested in the international scene, you can do well to read more detail of that on page 14. Kaduna community releases names of the 14 kidnapped victims. I was talking about the fresh 14 that were being kidnapped. More detail found on page 19. Lagos to push for special status listing of the LCDs as you can find detail of that on page 29. And here we can see some of the houses that were being raised in Delta community yesterday. More detail can be found in the paper, and that's all on the leadership newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, NJC raises alarm over alleged bid to defraud retired judicial officers. Federal government recovers 6.1 billion naira from arbitrary port charges, import-export fraud in 5 years. Saves 33.1 billion naira from demurrage freight rates. You can find details on page 6. The big story: killing of soldiers in Delta. Bring culprits to justice, Tinubu directs Defense Headquarters and CDS. Says act wicked won't go unpunished. Delta Governor Senate condemned killing. We didn't kill soldiers. This is coming from the Akwama people. And troops occupy community as demolition of houses continues. Mixed reaction as soldiers allegedly burn down houses in community. You can find details on page 2. Afenifere falls Tinubu on headers farmers clash. PDP APC stalwarts move mega party. Lagos to push for special status listing of LCDAs. You can find details on page 26. Residents protest over houses marked for demolition on Ibadan Circular Road. Stakeholders raise concern as Nigeria's inflation rate rises to 31.70%. You can find details on page 18, and that's all the news on Nigerian Trip.
On the Blueprint newspaper, federal government provides additional 60 billion naira supplementary budget for student loan. Now we will record that it was 50 billion. Now we're having an additional 60 billion naira supplementary budget for the student loan. We remember that you want to actually capture other people as well in the act, so you can read up more of that on page 13. Lagos discounted food market begins offer 25% discount, where we saw some of the papers where POS machine are actually not enough for those who wanted to budget the food at discount prices. VAT increases to 1.20 trillion naira in the fourth quarter of 2024. And we have Let Africa host Commonwealth Games and tells the CGF. More detail of that can be found inside the paper. And on the Delta communal clash, Tinubu orders CDS to bring soldiers killers to justice. Says attack on military, attack on the nation, and I believe that. Community race, resident flee. More detail can be found on the front page and on page 8. After 178 days in captivity, terrorists released 9 Gozo varsity students. Said we never abducted for money. So you tend to ask, why did they actually kidnap some of the students if not for money? You can do well to find more detail of that story inside the paper. Refer alleged budget pardoning to EFCC, ICPC, Syrup tells Senate. Once Ninge restated, Woko gets 1 billion naira for constituencies project. More detail found on page 8. And on the withheld salary, Sanu Nasu begins nationwide strike today. Nigerians' leather industry could generate 17.5 billion naira yearly. This is coming from the NILEST. More detail found on page 22. Expert advocate for 5-year tax waiver for drug manufacturers. More detail found on page 6. And we have a picture story on the front page of the paper. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On this day newspaper, EIU report federal government to raise VAT to 15% by 2027 to fund fiscal deficit. Predicts Naira to weaken to 1,770 to a dollar at the year end. Declares may achieve relative stability at 1,817 to a dollar in 2025. Says aggressive monetary policy tightening key to stronger currency, foresees further rate hike in 2024 amid inflationary concerns. NPR may fall to 12.5% in 2026. Predicts further exits of FDIs in 2024 amid Naira losses. Shatima urges Nigerians to be patient with administration as hardship hits harder. Soludo at second anniversary says Anambra hasn't seen anything yet. You can find details on page 5. The big story on the paper: Tinubu, attack on our military men is attack on our nation. We won't accept it. grants full authority to go after killers, says criminal will face full wrath of law, describes death of soldiers as needless. Atiku Obi senators orders condemn act. Armed forces continue siege on Delta community, search for killers, set buildings ablaze. You can find details on page 5. We have a picture story, Stanbic supports mental health, where we can see the chief executives of Stanbic ITC together with other stakeholders, and also Julius Ron's walking visit to NCDMB, and that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, insecurity hampering food security, Catholic bishops, farmers raise alarm, detailed on page 8. Edo Guba APC to unveil deputy governor candidate today. And coming from Obong Ata, he said why it's difficult to market Nigeria globally. You can find why on page 9. And on the Delta, killing troops lay siege to Okwama, raise more houses. Outrage trails murder of soldiers. Military deploys armored vehicles to Pombade Creek. Have authorized military to fish out perpetrators. Coming from Tinubu, it's barbaric, unacceptable. Coming from Peter Obi, it's despicable. Coming from other governors, act totally unacceptable. Coming from Pandef, officers' sacrifice shall not be in vain. Northern senators tell the CDS. Also, we are having Orubo Group urges the probe, and then Ijon youths condemn killing. More detail of all of these can be found on page 5. Lagos residents storm food mart amid complaints. More detail on page 28. Devolving more powers to states will bring socio-economic development, coming from Governor Mba. And then how the federal government fund petrol subsidy through crook sale proceed. You can find more of the how on page 19. And also we are seeing on the Edo 2024 APC leader kick against communalization of Guba primary. You can find more of that inside the paper. Nigeria tighten grip on second spot in medals table. That's talking about the African Games on page 39. And we have other smaller column of stories on the front page of the paper, as well as a picture story. You can do well to grab the Vanguard and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On New Telegraph, concerning VAT, improved services boost banks, others contribution to 393 billion naira. You can start with the details on the front page. Panic as well, scarcity hits NNPC limited retail outlets. Northern governors fret over prevailing security situation. Presidential federalism major setback to socio-economic development in Nigeria, coming from Mba. Retirement benefits fraudsters trying to defraud retired judicial officers, coming from the Chief Justice of the country. You can find details on page 7. PDP National Chair Suswam joins race to succeed Iyorcha Ayu. The big story, attack on soldiers, direct attack on Nigeria. Tinubu won, says killers won't go unpunished. Senate mourns and demands justice for slain soldiers. Killing despicable, coming from a Warrior, and then condoles military and victims' families. Soldiers raise killers hideout in Okoma, residents flee. And on reprisal, Harua urges president to call service chiefs to order. Probe incident, group tells Delta government and army. You can find details on page 2, 4, 7, and 29. On price hike, man CPPE false reps, comments on cement manufacturers. Lawyers push against capital punishment for offenders. This is concerning kidnapping. And on hardship, Nigerians lament high cost of eggs. Still on New Telegraph with health salary, SSANU and ASU begins nationwide strike today. You can find details on page 2. Remember, they started a 7-day warning strike and nothing has been done, and they are starting the full strike today. Governance turns family affair as political dynasties tighten grip on power. At the downside of the paper, we have a study that says mobile phone users who talk longer don't face brain tumors risks. You can find details on page 27, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, on internet outrage, which we have been facing for some weeks now, trade and payments suffer as service disruption may linger till April, where we're seeing the countries that have been affected, and then some of the service providers, others that have been also affected by that. So you can do well to, just like I stated earlier, to look for alternative just in case you're actually suffering from this disruption in some of your payment services, businesses. We know that a number of people have lost quite a number of money as a result of this delay in payment, and also people patronizing them. So I think there's always an alternative for all of this. So you can do well to consult any computer engineer or someone who knows an alternative to actually help you out of this. Other stories still on the Guardian newspaper: slave soldiers, Tinubu grant military full authority to pursue justice, silent on reprisal, where we're seeing a number of people are coming out to say no to the reprisal because some people that are suffering from it. We can see some of the houses that have been set ablaze by the soldiers just because of that. So we just hope that there was a better way to come about all of these things, rather than allowing other people to suffer and losing their homes as a result of this reprisal. More detail can be found on page 6. SANU NASU begins nationwide strike today, so that calls for doom. That is to say that some of our varsities will be shut down as a result of that. Northern leaders Serap seek probe of the 3.7 trillion naira budget pardoning allegation. Senate reps hold secret hearing on new student loan bill. Senate reps hold secret hearing on new student loan bill. Detail found on page 3. Katsina Zamfara governors not for boycotting security meeting, and we have cutting governance calls beyond Orusanya's report. That is an editorial which you can find on page 16 of the paper, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper. But before we move further with other paper analysis, we would love to take a break at this moment. Quite a lot of stories to chew, looking at the soldiers that were being slain in Delta State. Also, we're seeing that SANU and NASU are beginning strike today, so do not know the fate of our students. That is to say, some of our universities will be shut. And then also we're seeing that back and forth concerning the budget pardoning is still coming up, where others are calling that the former senator or the suspended senator need to be called back. So quite a number of questions, and we would love to hear your own questions and also your own reaction concerning any of the stories. So when we come back, we'll continue with the paper analysis. Please stay tuned with us.
Hello viewers, my name is Amaka Ocheke. We anchor the program The Living Room right here on Equa TV International.
You are welcome to watch us every Monday.
The Living Room is a very interesting family program where we discuss everything you want to know about family.
Talk about our children's mental health.
Keep watching. Our program is always here, 5:30 every Monday. We want you to ask questions. We want you to phone in and drop topics that you want us to talk about, even on our media handle on Facebook. We are there. So keep watching, keep listening. The Living Room.
Well, welcome back. If you're just tuning in, the program is The Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories locally and also internationally, and we'd love to hear your own inputs, your own contribution concerning any of the story, whether concerning Putin that have returned for his second term as the president of Russia, or we'll also love to hear what you have to say concerning the soldiers that have been slain in Delta State, the 14 that have been attacked, or rather the 14 that have been kidnapped fresh in Kaduna. And then also we're also looking at the issue of the strike that might start in some of the varsities as a result of SANU and NASU strike concerning the withheld salary. So we would love to hear your own input concerning any of the story. I still have Rachel Tanzi with me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's continue with the paper, looking at the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Daily Times, emerging market currencies squeezed until this third quarter. This is coming from experts. You can start with the details on the front page. The big story, killing of 16 soldiers, fear grips Delta community as Tinubu spits fire. Details can be found on page 4, and definitely pictures showing the houses that have been announced on Pabio to resign Ningi's suspension. You can find details on page 2. NASU SSANU begins 7-day warning strike. Bandits abduct 14 in fresh attack on Kaduna community. NJC alleges bid by fraudsters to defraud retired judicial officers. Fintech's investment in women can deepen financial inclusion. This is a report that you can find details on page 20, and that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, reps move to empower governors to appoint and remove judges. More detail can be found on page 26, and we hope that with that, if that power is being given to governors, we hope that it will be based on merit and not based on whatever it is. So let us see how it will move after reps move to empower governors to actually appoint and remove judges. Still on Daily Sun newspaper, we're looking at Delta State also. Soldiers, killers must be fished out, coming from the President Tinubu. Act condemnable, barbaric. Senate and Atiku, Obi and Clark and others are saying. Houses, raised residents flee community, and then 14 bodies have been recovered out of the 16. More detail found on page 4. Angry senators regroup against Akpabio over Ninge's suspension. Tinubu requests constitution review may suffer setback in Senate. More detail found on page 6. Hairstylist dispatch riders arrested for selling drug-laced chin-chin to students and parties. More detail of that can be found on page 5, and I think it's very important that we read that story carefully so you don't fall victim to such things. Domestic flight operators in their strain as high ticket prices, economic crunch shrink passengers volume. Travelers opt for road transport because of how high it is, and then our road transport are not safe because of kidnappers and bandits. So we hope something will be done to be able to rectify all of these things. On the sea cable court, Nigeria loses over 273 billion naira in 4 days. So you can imagine how much more we will lose if this continues till April, just like we are seeing the prediction. Internet services partially restore as telcos and banks reroute traffic. More detail can be found on page 2. And then LP crisis worsen, NLC demands Abure's resignation. Detail of that can be found on page 27. We have a picture story one by the Governor Mba of Enugu State delivering a lecture on health and education strategy at the London School of Economics, London, at the weekend. And then here we are having some of the stakeholders of Fidelity Bank. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any story that is of interest to you in the paper.
On Daily Independent, Sarah urges Akpabio to refer budget padding allegation to EFCC and ICPC, asks him to reinstate Ningi, threatens court action after 7 days. The big story on the paper, liquidity squeeze at forex market to linger, a report coming from experts. You can start with the details on the front page. Putin wins Russia election in landslide. Details can be found on page 6. Atiku Obi condemned killing of officers, soldiers in Delta, demand arrest of culprits. I haven't received any salary in 2 years, says Soludo. Retirement benefit, NJC denies requesting money from retired judges. NIMC assures Nigerians of data security. Again, gunmen attack Kaduna community, abduct 14 residents. Federal government begins nationwide mass metering project. Details can be found on page 6. Killing of soldiers in Delta, direct attack on Nigerians, a comment from President Tinubu. Gives military full authority to bring perpetrators to justice. At the downside of the paper, Lagos FHA partner on affordable housing for Lagos residents, Nigerians in diaspora. You can find details on page 6, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On Abuja Inquiry newspaper, soldiers murderer Odi Zakibim tragedies unfold in Delta village. And then the writer following that story, Falana kicks King regret youth action. Tinubu vows tough action concerning that. More detail found on the front page and on page 3. Scores of directors in the FCTA face premature retirement. Wike ignores seniority. This is coming from sources. Over 250 directors may be forced out, so you can read more detail of why all of that is happening on the front page and continue on page 3. NJC raise alarm as fraudsters target retired judicial officers. You can find more detail of that report coming from the National Judicial Council concerning that story. More detail found on page 3. We have some picture story on the front page of the paper. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On national economy, Nigeria tops Africa in refined petrol imports from Europe. Federal government engages global banks for Eurobond, eyes $1 billion in loans. Details can be found on page 4. The big story, blackout, Nigeria suffers 215 grid collapses in 13 years as outdated manual system worsen electricity situation in the country. We have stories on the front page. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 4, and then we can see how marketers have to use, the old ways of lighting up the market once it's night. And it's really sad because this is where we're seeing carbon emission and all of that, and it's unhealthy, and we're supposed to have moved past this electric situation in the country. Still on national economy, how inflation is changing consumer behavior. You can find details on page 8. And then we have a chart showing the US dollar, what it's being bought and then what it's being sold at, together with the pound sterling, the euro, and then this is the CBN exchange rate as at the closing down of last week. That is the 15th, Friday the 15th. And then we are seeing how much commodities are being sold. We are seeing Brent, and that is crude oil. We are seeing gold, we are seeing silver, and we are seeing gas. And that's all the news on national economy.
All right, let's still on the world of business. Let's take a look at the Business Day newspaper. And in Business Day newspaper, we're seeing Nigerians Eurobond plans predicted Edo's nomination as minister. This is an investigation, which you can read more detail of that on the front page and continue on page 30. The big story, port project risks delay on volatile Naira. Tinubu says killers of soldiers in Delta won't go scot-free. You can find more detail of why they said that. And then we are having debunking economic myth. Weak currency doesn't always translate to weak economy. Well, this is a question I hope to get more answers concerning whether the weak currency actually doesn't always translate to weak economy. Well, I believe that the stronger the currency, the stronger the economy. So even though maybe according to the paper here, there might be some reasons why that would not be it. So I think this is a story that everybody also should be interested in, whether you're into business or not. You can just have a little idea of what that means. You can find more detail of that inside the paper. And that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Joshua rises in heavyweight rankings. On the African Games, Team Nigeria hopeful of medals as athletics begin. That is the track event. Team Nigeria climbed to second after day 10. Details can be found on page 2. And then we have a win yesterday. Man United winning 4-3 against Liverpool. Chelsea's call late in dramatic win. And then we have Ahmad late winner sends Devils to FA Cup last 4. Again, Owoniyi out of Eagles friendlies. The big story, finally, Murphy backs 9th League 1 goal after brace. Again, Inadozie saves penalty in Paris FC win. Chukwueze scores first Serie A goal after 8 months. Cleverly praises Dennis. Details can be found on page 7. United City battle for Gumares. You can find details on page 4. Palmer set for £150,000 per week Blues contract. Arsenal ready to sell Nelson. You can find details on page 5. At the downside of the paper, on cricket, Yellow Greens brace for Namibia. Tess Giroud set for MLS switch. You can find details on page 3, and that's all the news on Point Sports Extra.
Wow, thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Celia.
And also thank you to our viewers, thank you to our supporters, and thank you to the crew members for keeping the day with us, and thank you for making this program a success for everybody to watch. Until we come your way tomorrow, do have a blessed day ahead.